welcome to the second episode on how to improve your marriage line. And today we are going to talk about the example where there are no marriage lines, or maybe there is a tiny little bit, so either no line or almost no line. What does it mean, and how can we improve upon this type of line? So, as I already mentioned many times, it's better if there is only one line. So the marriage line is coming from this side of the hand and it is horizontal, and it's better if there is only one. And you have an example now. So now let's look at our first example of no marriage line. Now this is a man who has had at least one wife, and he has had 3 children with her. I think he was married for about 10 years. I don't think he's married now. But as you can see, no marriage line. So what's the story behind him? Well, he was married to this lady, but the influence of his mother was very, very strong. Like, for instance, he used to give his paycheck to his mother. So when he got married, it was very hard for the wife to say, well, we have a family now, we have children, maybe it's time that you give me the money so that I can take care of the family instead of giving the money to your mother. And it actually created a lot of problems because he was never completely committed to his wife, because he was always under the influence of his mother. So he couldn't really develop a commitment. Now the second example, and this is a lady. She has been married for many years to the same man, but as you can see, no marriage line. So what happened? Well, in this case, it was interesting because she was interested in many things, and I knew that she had a business, so she used to talk about the business. But I didn't even know that she was married because she never talked about her husband. And one day I realized, because she told me, that not only she was married, but her business was with her husband. So he was her business partner. But she really took him for granted. She never actually mentioned his name. She never mentioned that what she was really interested in, well, it was the two of them doing it. So in a way, he didn't really count this much for her. She took him for granted. And this is usually what happens when there is no marriage line, is that, yeah, you like your partner, and yeah, you can be even in love, but there is no real commitment there. Even though it was a husband, even though he was actually the father of her 3 or 4 children, and even though he was a business partner, he didn't really count. Now, the next example is, as you can see, a tiny little line. So, yes, it does exist, but it doesn't show too much commitment there. So it's a type of man who may have a girlfriend, but he doesn't have any respect for her. So he has had girlfriend over the years, and I know he had one that lasted for at least 10 years. But even now when he talks about her, I know it was a person who really helped him a lot. She did a lot of things for him in his life, but he has no respect for her. So you can see how there is a lack of commitment there. Now, the last one, this is again a person who has no line there, no marriage line, even though he was married to 2 women, one after the other. And I think the second one, he has been married for at least 10 years. And I wouldn't say this is the lack of respect, but in this case, it's a person who has suffered a lot in his life. He has an Indian background, like Indian, like a North American Indian. I know he had a very tough childhood. I think he was adopted. And so he has had a wife, and then he had children. He's the first wife, then he had a divorce, and then he's now with a second wife. And he looks like he's very committed to her. He's very loving. But what's happening is that he's very fearful. He actually is afraid to commit himself, probably because he's afraid of getting hurt. So he's afraid of actually taking the step and really giving his love entirely. And this is what shows on the print. Even though he had 2 wives, there was no commitment because of fear. And as I mentioned, it was different part of the hands. You can see that. You can see it a lot in his heart line, for instance. So to go back to what does it mean when you don't have a line is a lack of commitment. And the lack of commitment can be for different reasons. A lot of the time you're just not even aware of what commitment means. So you may be only interested in a person, well, maybe because he's bringing you, well, he's a business partner. Or maybe the person is there, well, for physical reasons. A lot of the time it happens. But there is a lot of detachment. It can be also avoidance. And one good thing to actually develop the commitment is maybe to try to find a goal, but a goal where you really include your partner, or maybe your partner is going to be interested in your goal, and the 2 of you are going to do something together. And this is the example I'm going to show you of a before and after. In the before picture, you can see there is a tiny little line, and on the after picture, it's not very, very long, but it's a little bit longer. So you see how there is a development in the commitment. And this was a person who decided to build his house, to have his house built. And this was what brought him and his wife together, because he never really felt a commitment. He had no respect. He was this kind of people who doesn't really respect his wife, who doesn't say really nice things about her. And the time that they built their house together, they were really together. They really built something together. And you can see it in the lines being longer. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to show you the more recent prints that I took, and the relationship didn't last, and now he's alone, and the line has more or less disappeared. So lines do change if you put energy into the change. But if you don't, or if you really change in a negative way, it's going also to show on your hands. So now let's summarize what I have talked about. How do you develop a marriage line if you don't have one? So as you understand, now you develop commitment. So what is really important is to understand, why don't you have commitment? Why can't you have commitment for your partner? And it might be interesting to go into your past, maybe in your childhood, or what kind of parents did you have? Do you have hurts that you haven't been able to heal? Do you have fears that are still there? And if you look into that, and you might find out all kinds of things that are going to point you in the right direction. You might want to do some journaling. You might want to do maybe some therapy. You might want to come and see me, so I would be able to look at your hand and find out where it could be coming from. And remember that everybody is looking for love. So in order to find love, you have to give love. So if you don't have a line like that, a marriage line, the first thing that you have to do is give love, give commitment. And then you will see everything change. And probably you will attract more love. And I wouldn't be surprised if your line started to change, or to appear if you don't have one, or if it was really small, to become much bigger. So this concludes my episode on when you have no marriage line, or when you have only a tiny little bit. So stay tuned for our next episode, which is what happens when you have too many lines. See you next time. Bye-bye.